On May 22, 2026, the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Office of Enforcement issued a new enforcement directive concerning emotional support animals in housing. The directive has already created confusion for tenants, landlords, housing counselors, and fair housing advocates. In my opinion, the confusion is understandable. Emotional support animal issues were already complicated before this directive. Now, many people may assume that emotional support animals are no longer protected at all. That is not accurate. My concern is that some landlords may read the HUD FHEO May 22, 2026 directive and wrongly conclude that every untrained emotional support animal can now be treated as a pet. That would be a mistake, especially in Pennsylvania. HUD may have changed how its Fair Housing Office handles certain ESA complaints, but that does not automatically change Pennsylvania law or PHRC enforcement. Until Pennsylvania law or PHRC guidance changes, landlords should be very careful before charging pet rent, pet fees, or deposits for an approved emotional support animal. The most important point is this. HUD's internal enforcement position does not rewrite the Fair Housing Act, and it does not erase Pennsylvania's protections under the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. HUD's new direction appears to change how the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity may prioritize or evaluate certain emotional support animal complaints. My reading of the 26-page directive show HUD is moving away from its prior 2013 and 2020 guidance, which treated emotional support animals as assistance animals in many housing accommodation situations. The new approach reportedly places more emphasis on whether an animal is individually trained to perform disability-related work or tasks. That is a significant shift in HUD enforcement policy. But there is a difference between an agency enforcement memo and the law itself. The Fair Housing Act still prohibits disability discrimination in housing. Housing providers still have a duty to consider reasonable accommodation requests from people with disabilities. A policy memo from HUD may influence how HUD investigates or processes certain complaints, but it does not repeal the Fair Housing Act, does not amend the statute, and does not prevent individuals from pursuing rights through other legal channels. Even landlord-side legal commentary has acknowledged that the memo addresses HUD FHEO enforcement and does not eliminate private fair housing claims or state law protections. For Pennsylvania residents, there is another important layer, the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. The PHRA continues to prohibit discrimination in housing and commercial property based on disability. Pennsylvania's statute recognizes freedom from discrimination in housing, public accommodation, and employment, including protections connected to the use of service or support animals in certain circumstances. The Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission has also stated that under current PHRA provisions, emotional support animals are recognized primarily in the context of housing accommodations. That means, as of now, Pennsylvania residents and housing providers should not assume that HUD's directive automatically changes Pennsylvania law. That is the point I want to make clearly. In Pennsylvania, nothing has changed at this point. Under the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, housing providers should continue to handle disability-related animal accommodation requests carefully, individually, and consistently. Tenants should continue to understand that emotional support animal requests may still require reliable documentation when the disability or disability-related need is not obvious. In Pennsylvania, tenants who request an emotional support animal are generally asked to provide reliable documentation from a healthcare provider or other qualified professional when the disability-related need for the animal is not obvious. That documentation is not a pet permission slip. It is a recommendation or verification that the tenant has a disability-related need for the emotional support animal as part of a reasonable accommodation request. To tenants, do not assume your rights are gone. If you need an emotional support animal because of a disability, put your request in writing and provide the required documentation of need. To landlords and property managers, do not assume you can disregard all emotional support animal requests. Review each request under applicable federal, state, and local law. In Pennsylvania, the PHRA remains an important part of that review. For advocates and housing counselors, we need to explain this carefully. HUD's directive may change federal enforcement practice, but it does not automatically change the Fair Housing Act or Pennsylvania law. My concern is that the HUD FHEO directive may lead to rushed denials, misunderstanding, and unnecessary conflict between tenants and housing providers. Emotional support animal issues require a thoughtful, fact-based, specific review. Confusing policy shifts make that harder, not easier. Until Pennsylvania law or PHRC guidance changes, the safest and fairest message is this. HUD's directive may affect HUD's enforcement priorities, but it does not cancel the Fair Housing Act, and it does not change the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act at this point. Emotional support animal requests in Pennsylvania housing should still be reviewed as reasonable accommodation requests under applicable law. Lastly, let me state that this is for general fair housing education and information only. It is not legal advice. Tenants, landlords, and housing providers should consult an attorney or contact the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, HUD, or a qualified fair housing organization, such as the Fair Housing Council, for guidance on a specific situation.